Okay, this is just a test for audio for the live stream. Don't worry.
Midakiapi, Chanta Western Nape Chizapalo, James Rowley Fimachiapi na Shichango Lakoto Yate Mata. Welcome again to the 2020 GEO-Indigenous Alliance Summit. We're glad you're with us. We're thankful for the opening remarks from our leadership, and thank you for the prayers, Mr. Phil Tuigo, to get us started in a good way. As I said in my Lakota way, I'm James Rattling-Leaf. I'll be moderating the COVID-19 session, and so we look forward to a good discussion today and some good information to be shared from our Indigenous leaders from around the world. As we all know, COVID-19 has made a significant impact on our people around the world, and as we were putting together this summit, we wanted to make sure that we brought people in that were working on the COVID-19 issues on the ground. And so today we have a series of speakers that can help us understand, again, a little bit better of what's happening in their communities and how we can come alongside them and support them in this great effort. So without further ado, I wanted to introduce our first speaker. Her name is Galena Angarova. She's a representative of the Ihs Nation of the Burrat Peoples, a Russian indigenous group. Galena is executive director of Cultural Survival, and the title of her talk is Indigenous-Led Response to COVID-19. So with that, please share the video of Galena.
My name is Galena Angarova. I'm an indigenous person from Siberia. I'm also an indigenous rights activist. I come from the Abzai clan of the Ihs Nation of the Burrat people in Siberia. I'm also the executive director of an indigenous-led organization called Cultural Survival. Today in my presentation, I will be briefly speaking about cultural survival, our COVID response work, and also our global monitoring system. As mentioned, Cultural Survival is an Indigenous-led organization, and we advocate for Indigenous people's rights and support Indigenous self-determination, cultures, and political resilience since 1972. Although we're based in Cambridge in Massachusetts in the United States, we have 25 staff members based in 9 countries around the world, and the majority of our staff are Indigenous and women. The core of our efforts are supporting, amplifying efforts of Indigenous peoples, and raising awareness about self-determination for Indigenous communities. Since the start of the pandemic, our team, which is based in many places around the world and specifically in Indigenous communities, we decided to support Indigenous community with a holistic, multi-layered approach. Since the March of 2020, this year, we distributed 31 grants through our Keepers of the Earth Fund, which are small community-centered projects on food sovereignty, water security, mutual aid, health, and communication strategies. We also supported radio stations with 21 grants through our community media program to support programs on COVID prevention, food sovereignty, community health, community organization, and social aid. We also pivoted our bazaar program, which are live celebrations and events that we have twice a year in the Cambridge area, when artisans travel from all over the world to sell their art directly to the people in the Boston and Cambridge areas. But this year has prevented us to do that, and we pivoted to create virtual bazaars to continue supporting the economic sovereignty of Indigenous artisans. Moreover, we created 418 public service announcements on COVID prevention available in 130 Indigenous languages and distributed among over 1,200 radio stations. We also created the prevention manual and emergency toolkit for our radio stations, which are now available in English, Spanish, Portuguese, and 85 Indigenous languages. I want to talk specifically about our project called Global Monitoring System. And we used Google Maps as our main medium. We started the project in mid-May 2020. And we were hoping that we could shine a light on how COVID-19 is impacting Indigenous peoples globally, and hoping to lead to better access to resources as cases continuously rise, and especially among Indigenous peoples. We also saw that there were other types of issues related to COVID, as we noticed the increase of human rights violations occurring on territories and lands of Indigenous peoples, including mining and large infrastructure and development projects. So using the COVID situation, unfortunately, some Indigenous peoples are being removed from the land. We have registered cases in Africa, for example, where whole communities are removed by the national army from their traditional lands so that the governments could continue and expand their development projects. Our mapping project is a way for us as Indigenous peoples to show that we have this capacity of producing and manage our own self-determined data. And we do it because we have the capacity and responsibility to do this work. We understand the importance of disaggregated data and that we can respond to the issues appropriately in a timely manner. It's not an exhaustive and time-consuming effort, so it allows us to do the work, but do it at a minimum expense. Unfortunately, governments are not tracking the COVID cases, and even though they track cases of COVID in general, but they're not disaggregated by ethnicity and minority groups. So how do we do it? We research, we use information published by local communities, organizations, and journalists. We receive reports from communities, partners, and individuals. As of November 27, 2020, we have 230 Indigenous peoples with COVID-19 cases, and deaths were identified in 26 countries. We also registered 97 human rights violations in 31 countries, which are currently being tracked on the map. And I want to show you the map itself. So here's the map. It shows two layers of information. So one layer is COVID cases, and the second layer is human rights violations. And a lot of these layers, unfortunately, overlap, which proves the fact that COVID-19 has exacerbated our fight and our struggles against the mining projects and large infrastructure and development projects, and that the governments are taking advantage of this situation and Indigenous communities. So that's the gist of the program, the project that we're working on, and I hope that you found it useful. Thank you.
Thank you, Galena, for that very good presentation of video. Could you please turn on your video? We have a question for you. Again, thank you for your good work in supporting our people in terms of culture survival and your grants. So the question I would like to pose to you is, who are the funders that are helping you with that? And also, how can the GEO Indigenous Alliance support your efforts?
Good morning and good evening and good afternoon to the people who are in different time zones. It's morning for me, and thank you, James, for your question. So since the start of the pandemic, cultural survival mobilized, and we reached out to our existing foundation partners who could support us in this work. And the first grant to us was given by the Ford Foundation in Mexico, so that we could address and address the issues and support communities in Central America. And then we received some support from other foundations, such as Appleton Foundation, Oak Foundation, Decolonizing Wealth Project, and a number of others. So we received about maybe $250,000 from all foundations so that we could send small and impactful grants to Indigenous communities globally. About 3 weeks ago, we also received support from Macarthur Foundation, so we could start the second phase of the COVID response work starting in January. So we received $250,000. So the total is about $500,000, which is, I think, a very important support, a very generous support, but it's still a drop in the bucket, to be frank with you, to support Indigenous peoples globally. So I think with this message, I would like to appeal to the general public, individuals, as well as foundations and maybe corporate programs, that they do reach out to Indigenous-led organizations and support with their dollars and provide that support to Indigenous communities. If I could add a little bit more to what I was mentioning in my presentation, I think that as Indigenous peoples, we're very resilient, and it's not the first time when Indigenous peoples faced the pandemics. And let's remember that. Let's root ourselves in our values and our resiliency. That in addition to our self-determined solutions, like we've always practiced lockdowns in the past, right, as a way to prevent the spread, and ceremony as well. We also starting to use new technologies. Like in my community, where the members of my clan and my larger community they create WhatsApp and Viber groups to inform each other what's happening in the community. So let's use both traditional and innovative new solutions to help each other and stay healthy and safe.
Well, thank you, Galena. Again, thank you for your good work, and thank you for being a part of this summit, and we look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you so much, James.
All the best. Thank you.
You too. Thank you.
Our next presenter will be Minnie Degawan. She's Indigenous from the Igorot from the Philippines. And Minnie is the director of the Indigenous program for Conservation International. So Minnie, would you please turn on your camera so we could see you, and also please start Minnie's
Hello,
video.
good morning, good evening, good afternoon. I am Minnie Degawan, Kankanari Igorot from the Cordillera, Philippines, joining you today from the traditional lands of the Piscataway peoples here in Maryland, where I have been privileged to work with since 2016, when I joined Conservation International as the director of the Indigenous and Traditional Peoples Program. I would like to share something about the impacts of COVID on Indigenous peoples. And for somebody who is so far away from home, there is that additional impact on myself and my family that we are so far apart. But if there is something that COVID-19 has really highlighted, it is the systemic inequalities that Indigenous peoples face on a daily basis. It has emphasized the lack of services, both in communications, transportation, and medical services for many Indigenous communities. And this is further exacerbated by the lack of disaggregated data that impacts the response of governments to Indigenous peoples. It has also exacerbated food insecurity for so many Indigenous communities. But I would really like to emphasize one aspect of Indigenous peoples that has been really impacted by COVID-19, and that is the cultural disruption that has been brought about by this pandemic. So my community in the Philippines is rice-producing community, and there are many rituals that are associated with our agricultural calendar. But because of the pandemic, these rituals have been disrupted. Many of these rituals could not be practiced, and one of the things that has not been practiced are those surrounding the passing on of our elders, wherein the community comes together in solidarity to celebrate the life of that elder. But because of the health protocols that are being imposed, people cannot come together, and the coming together which strengthens solidarity has been lost. And this coming together has also been an opportunity for transferring traditional knowledge to the youth. And because we cannot come together, some of these are not lost, but they cannot be transferred in a smooth manner. But this is not to say that indigenous peoples are very helpless in the face of the pandemic. When the pandemic was first felt, our communities instituted their traditional systems of protecting the community. And one of these has been the lockdowns. Our people have always used community lockdowns as a defense against pandemic, against enemies, and has also been integrated in the agricultural cycle. It is an opportunity to give the community and the land a rest before undertaking new agricultural activities. Our community lockdowns is something that the community fully identifies and follows. It is something that we have been taught from our very early years, and these community lockdowns also strengthen community solidarity, because it means that the community gets together, does a quick assessment of what is the available food supply for the whole community, and whatever is there is shared. In these times when many of our brothers, sisters, and children are outside of the community because of education or because of work in the urban centers, this has also become a challenge for our communities, because how do we bring them back? How do we send support? And this has been something that has been challenging a lot of our communities. The other challenge that we face is that our communities are no longer as isolated before. So whereas we have community lockdowns, we cannot fully control the entry and exit of outsiders. Roads come through our communities, so miners and loggers, and unfortunately governments have said that these are essential industries, so they continue to operate, and these violate community protocols of lockdown and also bring in further danger of infections. The other big impact of COVID, and this is also impacting the next moves of communities in terms of building back, is that governments have also rolled back on safeguards related to indigenous peoples. For instance, in the Philippines, while there is a clear requirement for free prior informed consent before projects happen on our lands, government has rolled it back and has allowed projects to continue despite lacking free prior informed consent. So that is a big challenge, but there are also lessons that we have learned from this pandemic. And foremost of this is that the revival of agricultural practices to ensure food security. My community has been and is an tourism destination, and many of our traditional lands have been converted for tourism purposes. But with the pandemic, many of the youth are going back and using traditional agricultural practices and reclaiming some of the lands that have been abandoned for tourism. So that is one big lesson that has been learned, is that we need to rethink this whole cash economy and rely more on our traditional practices. And one of the other big lessons is the recognition of traditional governance mechanisms. It has been shown that the traditional governance mechanism is much, much more effective than the imposed government system. Our communities have decided to go back to their traditions in terms of lockdowns, in terms of providing support with each other, and have not relied on government relief services in order to cope. But again, even this has been used as to further discriminate against us, because now governments is saying that, oh, indigenous peoples are resilient and therefore they do not need much support. But resilience doesn't come in a vacuum. Resilience is guaranteed through the recognition of land and resource rights. And we are only able to do our traditional governance mechanisms, our traditional practices, if and only if our rights are fully recognized. So if there is one big lesson that we learned from the pandemic, it is that the rights recognition, or the recognition of the rights of indigenous peoples, is a must, and it is one of the it is something that will guarantee resilience and survival of indigenous peoples. Thank you.
Thank you, Minnie, for that enlightening presentation. And please, yes, good to see you again, and thank you again for your work and your time with us today. To the listeners and participants today, I also want to encourage you to check out our Slido link, and so that we have a place where you can ask questions of our presenters. So that, again, we want to build relationships with the work that's being done, and how we can stay connected after the summit. Minnie, you mentioned that you worked with the Conservation International. My question to you is, what's really been the role, or what you see as the emerging role for the conservation community to support the work that you're doing, and as well as other indigenous peoples?
Right. Good morning, James, and good evening to those in a different time zone. Thank you for the question. Indeed, when I joined Conservation International, it wasn't an easy decision. Indigenous peoples have suffered many years and many times because of conservation. But I also looked at conservation organizations as an ally for indigenous peoples, because ultimately we have the same goal of conserving nature for the future generations. And I am glad to see that more and more conservation organizations are recognizing that fortress conservation is not the way to go, but rather to include indigenous people. So there's a drive for inclusive conservation, which is really flicking the coin and not excluding people from conservation areas, but really working with people, because ultimately it's people who benefit from conservation who will make it sustainable. So in my work with CI, we conservation organizations have strong relations with governments and with funding agencies. So through that relationship, I am hoping to bring in more support for the work that communities are doing on the ground, not just through funding, but also through policy work with national governments. And hopefully there will be more enlightened conservation organizations.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that, Minnie, and all the best in your work as you go forward. And please consider the GEO Indigenous Alliance as a supporter of your work, and as we continue to work, how we can support your work as well. So thank you. Thank you, Minnie. Thank you again. Thank you. Take care. Our next presenter will be Douglas Ambrough. He's the CEO and technical lead of GEO Ihs Map. and he's a winner of the GEO Indigenous Hackathon, Hack for COVID. And he's from Nairobi, Kenya. And so please share Douglas's video at this time.
The challenges that indigenous communities face, although unique geographically, are quite similar to what other indigenous communities face in different parts of the world. State discrimination, such as withholding of citizenship or rights, forced eviction from native lands, physical removal or stripping of indigenous people's natural assets, including logging, mining, and obstruction or diversion of water resources, exploitation of intellectual property, such as stories, traditional knowledge, artworks, without compensation, systematic discrimination leading to higher rates of poverty, homelessness, malnutrition, and limited access to health services. All these problems unite all indigenous peoples worldwide, and so do the solutions. My name is Douglas Mbura from Nairobi, Kenya, and I'm going to share with you how participating in this year's GEO Indigenous COVID-19 Hackathon helped us to realize that indeed problems unite all indigenous people worldwide, as well as the solutions. My colleague Rasha Elinimieri, who is a data scientist and epidemiologist from Sudan, and I were among the 146 participants from 33 different countries who signed up for the GEO Indigenous Hackathon that was held on 5th to 7th June this year. The aim of the project was to find Earth observation-based solutions that are culturally appropriate to the challenges facing indigenous communities and underrepresented communities. There were about 8 challenges that were submitted by various communities, but our attention was captured by one from the Quilombola community, in which in the Brazilian Amazon. We were moved to create a solution for this challenge after we saw in the mainstream media a woman from the Quilombola community expressing her fears that COVID-19 was threatening to make their community invisible in every possible way, and that's according to the exact words that she used. So we resolved to create an easy to use, easy to deploy tool that will help the community to become more visible. We created an application that allows communities to quickly and easily create attention-grabbing maps and dashboards to share their stories by simply typing information on a spreadsheet. The information is then displayed as scroll-based maps, maps narratives, beautiful graphical presentation on a dashboard, and an intuitive and interactive maps with custom indigenous icons as required by the Indigenous Data Alliance. The tool is now being used by the Quilombola community, and as you can see, they are already populating the map with the data and are sharing their stories. They call it Visibilidade Quilombola, which translates to visibility of the Quilombola community. Now, what is even more encouraging is that the Surui Peita community, through their chief Almir, have also expressed interest in having the same tool to help them communicate where illegal activities like logging is happening and how such activities are impacting their community. We are currently working closely with the community to customize the application for their specific user case. They are calling the application Gara Itiksa, which means together with the forest. What this hackathon made us realize, and the reason we are sharing this, is that though we separate each other by arbitrary lines that we call boundaries, we are all one and the challenges we face as humanity doesn't distinguish, but does take advantage of these arbitrary differences that we place on each other. We realized that to solve most of these challenges, most of the time, we really don't have to reinvent the wheel. That perhaps there already exists tools and capability that has already been developed to address the challenges that we face as humanity. We only need to share, pick the right tools, resharpen them, and apply them to the particular user case. In conclusion, therefore, we feel that there should be established some kind of repository that documents all the available tools, technologies, and methodologies that have been applied effectively to solve challenges. This should also include lessons learned and best practices on how to co-design software with and for Indigenous communities.
Thank you, Douglas, for that great presentation. Can you please turn on your video at this time for a question? Again, I want to encourage all of us to go to slido.com and also type in GEO Indigenous Summit, one word, to pose your questions for our presenters this week, because we want to capture your questions, your ideas, and also your suggestions for our people. So Douglas, by the way, I hope you got a big pot of money for your win for the hackathon. And congratulations again on that good work. One of the strategic pathways for a GEO Indigenous Alliance is to work in community with youth and to really connect technology and culture and really connect it to a need in the community. How would you take your experience with your hackathon project and make recommendations or suggestions to the broader Indigenous community who want to possibly do a hackathon in their community?
Yes, thank you very much again, James, for the encouragement and for your word. What I can say is that mostly when you talk about an hackathon, what comes to the people of mind is that it's a competition between developers, and so that we can see who becomes a winner. But that really is not the case. An hackathon is about solving actual problems. Like in this case, we were trying to solve the actual problems that were submitted by the Indigenous communities through their leaders. So I think the hackathon is a platform. It's a platform where developers come together to solve the actual challenges, which are the pain points which are affecting the Indigenous communities. So I think what from the hackathon, what as I said, indicated on the video, what we learned is that we as the leaders, as people who are working with Indigenous communities, I think we need to really take the hackathons very seriously and be able to support and make sure that whatever tools that have been developed during the hackathon, we have a repository where we can document all the tools that have been developed, and then we make a follow-up to see whether these tools that have been developed have actually been used to solve the problems that they were meant to solve. And if not, then we kind of a follow-up. Why are the tools not being used? Do we need to perhaps improve on them? Do we need to what is it that can be done so that these solutions can be more applicable and more practical to solve the challenges that the communities face? I think that's what's more important than just winning or losing. Because, and again, another thing I wanted to say is that from the last hackathon, from the GEO Indigenous hackathon, there were about 8 challenges that were submitted, and we created a solution for the winning solution that has been played here on the video. It's called Visibilize Quilombola, which means visibility of the Quilombola community. There was another winning team which also solved another solution for the Samburu community. And then there was of course other solutions which were developed, but then there are several other challenges which have even up to date have not been resolved. These are problems that indigenous communities said that, hey, look, is there? They shared with the world. Look, this is something. This is where we are facing these are the problems that we have. Is there somebody out there who can help us to do this? So we still have several challenges which have not been tackled. I think as the stakeholders, we should still go back to see if we can be able to how best can we resolve those challenges, because they have not been. Those are the challenges, those are problems which have not been resolved. I think even as we move forward, we need to really look at that. So yeah, thank you very much.
Okay. Well, thank you again, Douglas, and for our participants. Go to Slido, and if you want to have any further connection with Douglas, please pose your question in the Slido, as we mentioned before. Thank you, Douglas. Take care, and be safe down there in Nairobi. Take care, brother.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Our next presenter is a friend of mine, and his name is Mario Vargas Shakiam, from the Shuar Nation of the Ecuadorian Amazon. He's also a co-founder of the GEO Indigenous Alliance, and had the great pleasure of meeting him in Canberra and been working with him for this past year. And he's also a representative of COICA. The title of his talk is COVID-19 and Amazon. I know he was having some connection issues with us, so I'm hoping he's with us. But with that, Rick, would you please play Mario's video? Thank you.
Me toca, ¿no?
Soy Shakem del pueblo Shuar del Ecuador, de la cuenca amazónica sudamericana. En esta ocasión quisiera abordar el tema del COVID, una pandemia que paralizó al mundo, que dividió a los pueblos indígenas y la ciudad. Nuestros pueblos quedaron encerrados sin el apoyo de los gobiernos, pero sin embargo nosotros, gracias a nuestra madre naturaleza, que solidariamente nos ha dado muchas plantas medicinales, pudimos salvar muchas vidas. Aunque lamentamos pérdidas de algunos sabios, de algunos líderes, pero nosotros seguimos firmes defendiendo nuestros territorios. Debo recalcar que en la Amazonía no contamos con datos de la tierra que suficientemente nos puede proporcionar información de manera inmediata. Tampoco tenemos internet. Se puede observar en comunidades muy poco. Por lo tanto, nuestros pueblos sufrieron la conexión, la comunicación con el campo y la ciudad. Pero, sin embargo, también nos afectó el cambio climático, porque nuestros ríos crecieron abundantemente y en muchas orillas del río están asentadas nuestras comunidades, en donde nuestras madres cultivan sus chacras y tuvieron grandes pérdidas de sus plantas, de sus medicinas, de sus alimentos, y no pudimos informar, ya que muchas vías atraviesan ríos que desconectan la ciudad y el campo. Por lo tanto, invitamos a la comunidad internacional que nos pueda apoyar para poder dotar del sistema de conexión. De esta forma nosotros podamos abordar nuestros conocimientos relacionados a la tierra a nivel internacional, y de esta forma invitar a una gran minga para poder defender nuestra casa grande, nuestro planeta, lo que es la madre naturaleza, nuestra selva, nuestra casa, en donde abundamos muchos pueblos, muchas culturas, muchos idiomas, muchas sabidurías. Eso es lo que nosotros, a través de la tecnología, a través de la conexión, queremos nosotros difundir nuestros conocimientos y aportar a la comunidad internacional, aportar a la comunidad científica con nuestros conocimientos, porque nosotros milenariamente hemos venido resistiendo en nuestros territorios con nuestros conocimientos. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Mario, for your presentation. Good to see you, my friend, again. Hope you're well in the Amazon. Mario, my question, I know you have a translator there, so my question is, how can the community here really support your efforts again? Can you give us one or two or three ideas that would be helpful to you in your work as you proceed with your work there, and what can the international community do in terms of a real next step for you and for your community to support you in this COVID-19 era? Thank you.
¿Qué puede hacer realmente la comunidad internacional?
Buenos días a todo el público y también mandarles muchas energías desde la Amazonía y a todos los que están participando, felicitarles por unirse a este gran minga que hoy ha iniciado.
Hello, good morning to the world. Thank you for participating. Thank you for joining us in our great communal presentation.
Frente a las interrogaciones formuladas por James, quisiera mencionar a la comunidad internacional que es muy fundamental contar con el tema de conexión en los pueblos indígenas, sobre todo en la Amazonía, en toda la cuenca amazónica.
What I would like to mention to the international community as challenges that we're facing with is the theme of connection, communications.
Y también contar con datos relacionados a la tierra para poder difundir de manera urgente al mismo Estado y a la comunidad internacional frente a las situaciones críticas que vivimos los pueblos indígenas. Eso es como primera idea que propongo.
The first idea that I propose, which is very, very big and a big priority, is to be able to release and communicate data from the lands, to be able to disseminate urgently to the government and the international community what the critical situations that the indigenous people are experiencing.
Como segundo criterio, también quisiera plantear e invitar que tenemos que conservar nuestra madre naturaleza, porque allí están muchos conocimientos, muchas medicinas que nos sirven para salvar vidas, pero también queremos que la comunidad internacional, que la comunidad científica pueda aportar para el apoyo de los pueblos indígenas.
I also want to mention that it's so important to conserve Mother Nature, because Mother Nature has a lot of knowledge. It has medicinal plants that serve to save our lives, and we want our international community to know that we have this value. That's it.
Thank you, Mario, and thank you for the translation. Again, take care. Take care, Mario, and we'll talk to you soon here as we can close the summit. Again, if those that are you listening, please stay connected to Mario and his work through Slido, and we'll continue to keep the communication lines open to support his work. Our final presentation, our final video for this part of the agenda is Nadine Claw. Nadine is from the Navajo Nation. Nadine is the IT Analyst GIS Coordinator for the Navajo Housing Authority. And I was able to see Nadine's video, her presentation at a meeting several weeks ago. And so this is one of the largest tribes in America. And they've been using information technology to help work with the COVID-19 in their community. So with that, Rick, would you please show Nadine's video? Thank you.
Hello. I want to say welcome to the GEO Indigenous Summit 2020 from Earth Observations. My name is Nadine Claw. I am the GIS Coordinator, IT Analyst for Navajo Housing Authority. We are an enterprise of the Navajo Nation. And I'm going to be talking to you about our COVID-19 response that we had here on the Navajo Nation. But before I do this, I'm going to introduce myself in Navajo. Yat she Nadine Claw in the share Kabahinsle, my discus near Bushes Chin. Senajini that Shache, Kia Ani da Chanela. In Navajo, we introduce ourselves by our 4 clans. So we have to continue this tradition. So what we're going to do is, this is our Esri Story Map that we created. And in the first, we created 3 slides on this. And this is the picture that we used for our NHA way. This is the first video. It shows the how to flatten the curve in Navajo that was created by our Fort Defiance Indian Health Service hospital. The next video tells you how to wash your hands and the importance of washing your hands in Navajo. And then the last video is actually just a video on the importance of using soap. So people are saying, why do I need to use soap? So our first tab in the Operation NHA on the mapping was this map that we created here, this dashboard. This shows all of the units that we have at NHA, and you can select them by IHS. One of our 100, there are 8 IHS areas. There are 110 chapter areas, and there are also, we also have our NHA project numbers. What this map shows, the blue dots are all of our units, all of our NHA units. The yellow dots are where our elderly live. And in our GIS, we know that we have 649 elderly units, and that's where all our elderly are. What we did was, earlier this summer, we had donors donate food to us, and we created 649 boxes of food for all of our elders, and we gave it to them so that they wouldn't leave their home. So if we go to the next map, you're going to see this is the Navajo Nation's COVID-19 map that they're using. This is just a link that we have in our story map. This tells you the occurrences, the number of people that have been tested, how many positive, how many negative. The map, if you scroll down some more, you'll see some more. You'll see more information based on age. Scroll down some more, Anders. You'll see by age. You'll see all the information there. So let's go to the next map. This next map is the IHS map. This is all of IHS. This is their map that they created. This is just a feature service, a REST feature service that we are using. We changed it up a little bit just so that we could understand it. These are the exact same numbers on that Navajo Nation's dashboard that I showed you previously. Okay. So this tells you that right now, currently, looks like Chinle has the most positive cases. We also incorporated some other free stuff that came from ESRIs, like the definitive healthcare. You can search by the service area unit. It tells us where all the hospitals are, what their capacity is, but it doesn't tell us what their current capacity is. So that's something that it doesn't tell us. These are stuff that we created. I know it's really fast and there's more I could tell you, but you can email me at nclah@hooghan.org if you would like more information on how we created all of this stuff. So I'm going to let Anders talk about the Navajo Nation Need and At-Risk app that we created so that we can try and find our elderly. Go ahead, Anders.
Hello, everyone. So this is an app that the NHA developed as part of Operation NHA Way, and the intent was to be able to distribute resources that were being donated to the Navajo Nation. And this app could be accessed on mobile or on a browser. Right now we're looking at it on a browser. And this app was designed so that people could go out and collect information, or also the person that was being collected, the information being collected for, could also submit it themselves. And they would provide their contact information, their location, and kind of the meat of this survey is just getting some demographics about the person that is in need, such as home health care, medical transport service, if they have running water, electricity, cell phone, kind of seeing what their basic needs they're up against, and then also surveying them to find what their top 3 needs are, so that information could be reported back to NHA so that the resources could be properly distributed. And in closing, I'm going to pass it back to Nadine Kwa.
So this Navajo Nation Indian at-risk app also asks a lot of questions about whether or not they have electricity, running water. We have a 30 to 40% rate of no water and no electricity. So we're hoping that this public Survey 123 app is able to be used by the public so that we can locate all of our elderly that don't have or are just, out in the middle of the reservation where they don't have anything, water, electricity, anything. And if they have any needs, then we're hopefully able to assist them. I've been working with a lot of humanitarian groups here on the Navajo Nation, and once we receive this information, I can forward it over to the humanitarian group, and hopefully they will be able to assist us. I realize this is very fast, and I hope you enjoyed what we showed you. And like I said, you will have my email address if you have any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nadine. Nadine was not able to join us on the live part of this presentation today, but we'll make sure to connect you if you really want to follow up with Nadine on her work. We'll do that with you. So just let us know how we'll be able to do that. Now we're going to transition to what we call lightning talks. So these are talks, obviously very quick. We want to always be mindful of our time, so we get all our presentators in and we just get a good question. And also, if you can be precise with your answers, we would really appreciate that. So let's begin with our lightning talks. I'm going to introduce Roberto Lardares from the University of Geneva. The title of his talk is Deforestation in Brazil, and is spreading COVID to Brazil's indigenous people. With that, please show Roberto's video.
Paper that analyzed one specific driver of COVID-19 spread in Brazil. Deforestation, another 2020's Brazilian pandemic. There are reasons to believe that deforestation is related to COVID-19. Increased deforestation in indigenous lands in 2020 entails some level of conflict. Indigenous communities are exposed to the virus through improper contact with infected people, especially because of illegal mining. The growing deforestation, combined with droughts and wildfire, puts pressure on indigenous peoples to displace to regions where the virus might be already present or worsen respiratory health risks. In this paper, I find deforestation explains 22% of COVID-19 transmission into indigenous populations. With a new data set covering more than 5,000 municipalities and using daily data, I estimate that 1 unit increase in deforestation per 100 square kilometers is associated on average with a confirmation of 5.5 new daily cases of COVID-19 in indigenous peoples. Also, weekly, it means that 1 square kilometer deforested today results in 9.5% more new cases among indigenous peoples in 2 weeks' time. The evidence suggests that the main mechanism through which deforestation intensifies human contact between indigenous peoples and infected people are illegal mining and conflicts. Municipalities that feature illegal mining or conflict are associated with increase in deforestation of 179% or 63%. On top of it, I find that deforestation is only positively correlated and statistically significant with COVID-19 hospitalization in indigenous people, but not in Black, white, Pardo or mixed or East Asian people. In this work, I aim to shed some light on a complex and sad reality that many indigenous peoples experience in Brazil today. The tragic side of all this story is that the indigenous peoples are the ones who relatively lose the most from deforestation, illegal mining, and also COVID-19. And the interaction of all these effects is even more complicated than initially thought. And it is also important to note that the current and uncivilized Brazilian government is responsible for actively fostering this tragedy.
Well, thank you, Alberto, and for your lightning talk. And I guess the question that we ask our speakers today is how can the general public really support the work that you're doing in the Brazil, and what are things that we could do as a next step? Alberto.
Hi, thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be here, James. And I think what I'm interested here is obviously to understand this very complex situation that is happening, and it's very important to me to work with the indigenous leaderships as I managed to get very new data from them in Brazil. They are doing a terrific work to improve the government statistics. So all this effort to me as a more like in the scientific field is very important for us to understand better what's going on, because the challenge is very big, and the consequences are very bad for many indigenous peoples there.
Okay. Thank you, Alberto. Again, thank you for being a part of this and your support. And we'll obviously keep posted and keep updated. If you can help us with that, it'd be great. Take care and be safe in this COVID era.
Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Rudolph Kemper. Rudo is a program manager at Digital Democracy and a second prize winner in the GEO Indigenous Hackathon for COVID event. The title of his talk is Terror Stories, Mapping Indigenous Place-Based Oral Histories. With that, please show Rudolph's video. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Rudolph Kemper, and I'm a geographer and technologist with Digital Democracy. Today I'd like to share with you a little bit about Terra Stories, an open source application for mapping indigenous oral histories, and what we did for the GEO Indigenous COVID-19 Hackathon. Now, when I first read about the hackathon, I was very interested, but I became especially excited when I read about James Rattlingly Jr.'s Lapi Wawapi Challenge. Lapi Wawapi, which means to write something for a purpose, called for an app that will support the transmission of knowledge between the elders and the youth, while advancing the use of the language via digital stories that have a connection with the landscape. Now, when I read that, I thought, hey, that sounds like this app we've been developing with communities in the Amazon rainforest called Terra Stories. So I thought what I'd do was to build the app for the Lakota community and landscape as a hackathon submission, to show how it can work for any indigenous community, and I can briefly show you that now.
Welcome to Terra Stories. Here we have the entrance page of Terra Stories for the Lakota, where I've added a landscape background image and a Lakota greeting message. You can translate all parts of the app into any language. This is the main Terra Stories interface. As you can see, most of it consists of a map, where I added some Lakota territory data from native land. You can zoom in and out and interact with the map. In the sidebar, you have the stories that are associated with the place markers on the map. I added a mix of videos about Lakota lands and language that were linked to in the Lapi Wawapi challenge. By pressing or clicking on one of the stories, the map takes you to where it took place.
You can also press or click on one of the map markers to filter a list of stories associated with that place in the sidebar. So here's a story about the Preston Mesa place in Arizona. It's also possible to filter the stories, for example, by region. I added stories from 2 regions, Lakota and Navajo. When I select Navajo, TerraStory zooms in on that region and filters stories associated with Navajo. You can also filter by the type of place, which is automatically populated from the story data, or you can filter by the speaker of the story if you only want to view stories told by a certain person. With TerraStories, it's possible to restrict stories that you want to protect, and only allow some people access to them. To do so, you can set up special logins for users who should have access to the stories, such as Lakota community members. Once you've logged in with a username and password, restricted stories that you have permission to view will show up. You can see that it's a restricted story if it has a little lock icon next to the title. This is how with TerraStories, communities can have full control over who has access to their data and who doesn't. And this completes our short demo of TerraStories for the Lakota, built for the Lapi Wawapi Challenge of the GEO Indigenous Hackathon.
Well, please put your camera on, Rudo, if you could. Thank you, Rudo, for that presentation. You know, I'm a little biased about that work as Lakota myself, and thank you for taking on the challenge and doing the good work that you're doing. You know, one of the things that we talked about, and I think many Degawan talked about the role of protection of cultural heritage in this COVID era. You know, what are other things that you're thinking about in terms of TerraStories or other maybe technologies or partnerships or ideas that you're doing to help think about cultural tribal heritage and languages and things that would support a community as they have to stay isolated in a way, but also how can the role of technology help support those things? So I'd ask you that question, Rudo.
Wonderful. So good morning, James. It's good to see you again, and hello to everybody that's tuning in right now. So yeah, wonderful question. What comes to mind right away is Indigenous data sovereignty and trying to figure out ways to ensure that communities on the ground at every point and complete control and sovereignty over that. So one consideration that a digital democracy we pay special attention to is the need to have things available offline. So that's one reason why TerraStories is one example of an application that speaks to that, was designed to be offline compatible, and sort of other applications that really create opportunities for communities to have direct control over their data without internet access, and also in their territory. In South America, that's a big topic of concern, is data going to the cloud, and sort of discomfort around that for different reasons, philosophical as well as logistical. So being able to control data is a big concern. And that's in regards to intangible cultural heritage as well, insofar as a lot of that has spiritual, relationships to the land for communities, and is of importance to protect on a local basis. So Indigenous data sovereignty is a point there. And then I would also highlight co-designing, as Douglas actually mentioned in his talk as well, co-designing the softwares and tools for Indigenous communities so that their feedback and input can be directly reflected in what is being built in terms of an infrastructure that really serves them to help them protect that intangible cultural heritage.
Very good. Thank you, Rudo, for that. And just if you would just stay with us here, we may have additional questions and a little bit more time at the end of this session. So in case we have other questions for you, Rudo, thank you again. Thank you for your good work. Again, stay safe where you're at, and take care. Thank you very much. Wopila Tanka. Our final lightning talk today is Leif Grunwald, CEO and co-founder of Indigeniza, and is a member of the UN Innovation Network. So Rick, please show Leif's video.
Hi, I'm Leif Grunwald. And as we all learned throughout 2020, the nature of coronavirus made it an unprecedented disease for the entire human race. But its mortality rates are higher among most indigenous communities because of their adverse socioeconomic conditions, which increase their vulnerability to this new infectious agent. It was quite striking to see how this pandemic has revived memories among native societies of devastating epidemics of the past. This is especially true in lowland South America, where the Amerindian population lost an estimated 90% of its original numbers due to the measles, smallpox, and influenza outbreaks that these people have weathered over the course of their history. The past few months convinced us we need hope, we need solidarity, and we need creative and coordinated action on sustainable development goals. The COVID-19 pandemic and its impact amongst indigenous people made us realize we can certainly do so by shining the spotlight on creative and transformative initiatives accelerating transformative action for indigenous people. In short, we need to make a difference by offering intelligent approaches and solutions that maximize funds for indigenous populations, and by co-designing, by bringing to existence and working out ambitious innovation projects attentive to this new pandemic scenario and to a socially inclusive sustainable development paradigm which respects indigenous populations in their specific regimes of knowledge and deem them a foundation for innovation models for a common future. We reason that the usage of low complexity technological developments such as blockchains and virtual currency tokens could be the solution we need to develop culture-based and high-value units that can generate and share wealth from the traditional knowledge of lowland South American indigenous people without destroying these practices. We strongly believe these practices are unique and differential assets for local communities, capable of simultaneously reaching global markets and improving the conditions for these people to live well, or vivir bien. Under this scenario, we need innovative approaches that make culture visible and track the exchange of value. We believe blockchain provides opportunities to create new ways of operating, creating transparency and improving accountability. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Leif. If you could just turn your camera on again for a question. Again, greetings to you, Leif, and thank you again for your time and efforts and your good lightning talk again. You mentioned about this idea about really supporting indigenous people and this idea of co-development. Can you further share some of the processes of how you and your group and your organization has really pushed forward this idea of co-development with indigenous people, and how that works, and some good thoughts on how others can do or follow some of the work that you're doing?
Okay, thank you, James, for the wonderful question. Well, me and people from Indigenous, and we are basically talking from Brazil and from Peru. So during this pandemic scenario, we had a hard time with lack of funding for the indigenous communities. Like the state didn't fund like local governments and like federal government. They didn't fund anything for indigenous people. So they started like lacking assistance. So we created like virtual currency tokens. These virtual currency tokens, like based on blockchain technology, could be bought by like pretty much everywhere in the world, as long as you have like a blockchain account, like in a blockchain platform. So we co-designed it with indigenous communities here in Brazil and in Peru, like a virtual currency token that could be bought like pretty much from everyone in the world. So with this money, we started making and selling kind of like cultural assets. This token started like fundraise for people, and it came out as like as an alternative, as people didn't need to access like banks and like federal funds. They could just create a fund themselves and just use the money for whatever they wanted. So this is pretty much what we meant like by co-designing and co-sharing like this practice with them.
Okay. That's great. Well, thank you again for that response and that question. Again, we at the GEO Indigenous Alliance has been shared already the pathways, the 4 or 5 pathways that we've agreed that what we heard to be needs in Indigenous community. And your issue of internet access is an important one. Your issue of how these things get funded is an important one. Also, the idea of intellectual property and protecting Indigenous people's knowledge and things like that also are important that we are very mindful of. And so, so thank you again for your presentation again, Leif, and all the best to you in your work going forward.
Thank you, James.
So thank you very much. Take care there. Be safe down there. We have a little extra time here as we begin to wrap up this first session with you all. We had a question for Douglas on the COVID hackathon, and I want to bring Douglas back into this discussion if it's okay. Douglas, we had a question for you, and here's the question: is how could you connect your experience with technologies such as blockchain and virtual currency tokens to fundraise for your communities? Number 2 is, would it be possible to share the website of the app development, the app that was developed? And number 3, how do you protect stories submitted from the challenge of exploitation of intellectual property that you mentioned?
Yes, thank you very much for the question. To start with the first question, how could you connect? Yes, we indeed. In fact, even during the start of the hackathon, one of the considerations that we were looking at is how we can make this application sustainable, how the element of sustainability. And so, if you log in to the application that we are hosting at the moment, we are hosting it on we are using a temporary hosting service. You will see that at the moment we have included a PayPal link where somebody is interested in supporting this application can be able to make a donation. And so about connecting other technologies like blockchain, this is something that we would be interested in, and as part of improving the application for other users. And so, although at the moment, the application that we have at the moment, we are not able to support, but we have built it in such a way that we can be able to incorporate services such as blockchain, such as the PayPal, or another service that people might like to use. On the second question, I have on the chat, I've placed there a link to where we are hosting the application. It's a temporary. It's where we are hosting. It's where we are hosting the application at the moment. But one thing that you need to realize is that this application that we are building is not our application. What we build is for the community, for the Quilombola community. So eventually, that's the reason that we are trying to fundraise at the moment. Eventually, what we want to be able to open a proper web hosting service where this application is hosted for the community. And even as we move now for other communities who might also be interested in this service, we will be able to work for them on a proper web hosting service as opposed to where we are hosting at the moment. And then the third question about how we will protect the stories, how we protect the stories. This is a very important question, and I saw this is something that like the application that was submitted by the second team, they have tackled this solution very well. But again, we need to identify that for our solution, we were building up the platform that we were provided is that we are trying to solve. We are trying to build up an application for the community to share their stories with the world. So this information that is published on our platform, on this application, is only that data. I don't know whether you are able to. Can you hear me? Sorry. Can I be heard?
Yeah.
Yes, please go on.
Okay.
We can still hear you.
Oh,
Yes,
okay.
keep going.
Yeah. Yes, our application is for publishing information that or the stories that the community want to share with the world. That was the challenge that we were trying to solve. And even for the other, I indicated that there is another community, the Suripeta community. They have been doing a lot of work in protecting their forest. So they're also interested in our application because it will provide a platform for them to share with the world. So it's upon the community to determine what information it is that they want to share with the world, and then now we provide that easy platform to create the maps to publish the stories that they want to publish. So I don't know whether that one answers the question yes. And the fourth question I can see they were asking about the internet. I'm sorry. At the moment, the application that we have, it can only be used if for communities that have access to internet. I understand there are most of the communities might not be able to have access to the internet. But for those communities that have access to the internet, they can be able to easily publish and share their stories with the rest of the world using our platform. I don't know whether that one has answered the questions.
Well, thank you, Douglas, for that, for your answers, and I appreciate you sharing. I think your thoughts and your ideas of how you work with your people's knowledge is important. As we get ready to get close to the end of here, I also want to bring in Minnie. Minnie, are you still with us? Again, I think we heard this several times in our session today about the access to internet, and how the impact of that, lack thereof, is really affecting how we go forward as a people. And so I know you mentioned the idea about access to the internet and how that is important to the future of our communities and our children's education. So I would wonder if you would share a bit about some of your ideas of how we can maybe address that. I know it's a big issue, but I would give you the floor to talk a little bit more about that, Minnie, if you would, please.
Thanks, James. Not really so much ideas as concerns, and maybe the Indigenous GEO Alliance can spend some time to think about this. There are many communities that do not have access to internet or even the hardware to connect. And that is a big problem, especially at this time when communities are facing issues of food, lack of food and everything. So whatever budget they have is really budgeted or allocated to ensuring food security. So maybe this is an appeal to those who are able to provide some of this hardware as well as internet to provide that. The other concern that I have, and maybe again this can be a topic for discussion, all of these apps are great, and I wish we had this before. When we share knowledge inside the community, when we transfer knowledge, we take into account gender and age factors. There is some knowledge that we cannot share to 14-year-old boys or 14-year-old girls. Some of that knowledge is waits until they are 40, then that knowledge is transferred to them. And that transfer happens with rituals so that it is very valuable. And I wonder how having them on the internet make sure that they are preserved and can be used in the future, but at the same time we lose that very valuable part, that the ritual that goes with it, because that emphasizes the importance of this knowledge. So again, I don't have the answers, but I really want the GEO Alliance to have further discussions in this, because I am sure that it's not only in my community where knowledge sharing is gender and age specific. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Minnie, again for sharing that, and that's it's very important. And I think as a GEO Indigenous Alliance, we get the opportunity to share these ideas, but also to begin to advocate and amplify and articulate why it matters that our people our communities need internet access to hardware, to software, to training. All those things are really important. We're getting close here to the end again. I just sort of want to take this time and use it wisely. I'm going to go back to Rudo. Rudo, if you would put your camera on, please. And again, I think the issue that we're hearing a little bit here, at least from my ears, and what I'm hearing is that the role of our allies, the role of our partners, and to Indigenous people, Indigenous knowledges and things. How would you speak to your circle, your organizations, those maybe are non-Indigenous, and give them some thoughts of how best to work with us as Indigenous people, based on your experience, but also maybe things going forward in the future, especially with COVID. We saw the good work that's being done, how technology is being used, like the Navajo Nation. Any thoughts from you as we think about this and how we might go forward together, GeoDigious Alliance and our partners?
Sure. Thanks, James. That's a really interesting question. I would largely echo a lot of the concerns that Minnie posed as well around not sharing sensitive or restricted data and ensuring that proper care is taken when developing applications, that those kinds of things don't get accidentally or unintentionally shared. And it also speaks to a broader concern around this whole movement of open data, right, which is a big thing now in Earth observations and geospatial data more generally, with communities like OpenStreetMap and more publicly available satellite imagery, is the question, really thorny questions around consent, right, and whether communities on the ground have consented to their data being shared in such a way, because even imagery can share a lot about a community's land use activities that they may not want to share. And I also think about uncontacted communities in the Amazon rainforest, for example, and elsewhere, that may have their locations leaked, which can be a sensitive issue in regards to others that may want to contact them or be aware of their whereabouts. And then the same thing with open data, when suddenly you see polygons and points and lines drawn for communities on the web without those communities even being aware that their data has in a way been shared. And sometimes it can be done in a way that's intended to be altruistic, like, for example, for humanitarian purposes, to know where infrastructure is located. But I think consent needs to be taken more seriously by our non-Indigenous allies, just around sharing of data. So going back again to Minnie's point about when developing these applications, to really ensure that the infrastructure and the technology is built in such a way to really protect that data as much as possible.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, Rudo. I think the idea of data sovereignty. We have a great panel that's coming up on day 3 that's going to deal with data sovereignty, and I think that those of us are on the summit today. Your ideas are welcome, so please share that with us at a Slido. I also wanted to bring in Diana. I think Diana Mastrazzi. With Douglas's presentation on the COVID hackathon. Diana, if you would turn your camera on. And so I wanted to ask you a question. I know that the idea that we're looking at the future in terms of how we bring in our youth, and in particular issues like Douglas talked about, is really preparing that next generation to work in community and work with our partners in terms of the data, the software and development, and the technical capacity. So would you share a little bit about where the hackathon is going? Will there be new opportunities to participate, and how other people can get involved in that as well? Since you are a leader of that, and we wanted to let you know about that, or share that if you would, please, Diana.
Hi, James. Thank you so much for the question. And yes, so the Geo-Indigenous Hack for COVID is still ongoing, and we are receiving further challenges from Indigenous communities. And we're still working with Douglas and the team that is working with Titus to ensure that their solution is co-designed in a culturally sensitive manner. And we will be posting several updates on when the next online hackathon will be next month. Thank you, James.
Well, I have a follow-up question as well. So let's say that we have these these participants today with somebody with deep pockets, how could they sort of financially or resource the hackathon? Are there any things in place that they can give or participate in now? Or how are you thinking about welcoming funders or supporters to the hackathon?
Well, we welcome funds to provide training support, especially for the indigenous communities, to ensure that they are the ones co-designing their applications. And there will be many opportunities as well for sponsors to get involved, and we will let everyone know once in the coming month. Thank you, James.
Well, great. Well, thank you, Diana Mastrazzi. Again, thank everybody as we wind down. I just sort of want to take a few moments and just express my appreciation for all the presenters today and sharing your work with us, and it's important work. As we know that, COVID-19 is really impacting our Indigenous people, the most vulnerable people, I would say, in the world. And so it's going to take a lot of effort, a lot of energy, and a lot of resources to come alongside us and to work with us to, said, to co-develop these solutions and how we really address the issues of our cultures, the issue of our infrastructure, the issue of health. We saw Nadine Claw, even though she wasn't with us live, she really began to show a picture of our people and the things that they're facing as well as with around the world. And again, I will say leadership matters. We really want to support our leaders who are doing this great work. And the GEO Indigenous Alliance is really dedicated, again, to come alongside existing organizations, existing people, existing ideas. We don't have the answers, but we certainly going to come alongside and support, the best way we can. We want to grow the alliance to be relevant. We want to grow the alliance to be reciprocal, certainly responsible as we go forward with this work. So thank you again, everybody, for being with us today. What a great session. Continue to encourage one another as we go forward. And so as you get ready for the next session, I would welcome you and encourage you to come back and join us again for the Disaster Risk Resilience Climate Action Center. And that's going to start at 1700. I'll still try to get used to the CET idea, Central European time, so look forward to that. Again, thank you, everybody. If you're not going to join us, have a great day, and we look forward to you working with us in the future. So with that, Rick, I'll sign off. Stephen, anything else? I'll sign off from my side.
Much, James. We now have about 30 minutes until we start the next session, which will be on disaster risk resilience and climate change. So hope to see you all back here in 30 minutes. Thank you again to all the speakers and participants, and to you, James. Bye for now.